All right, welcome everyone to this weekly Wednesday webinar delivered by STORK. My name is Savannah Hance and I'm a consultant with STORK's Asset Management Technology Group, and I will be your moderator during this webinar. I just want to thank you all for taking the time to dial in. We all are living in very interesting times right now. It makes us reevaluate the choices that we're making on a daily basis, so all the more thanks for taking some time out of your day to spend with us. Of course, from our side, we're happy to share our knowledge with you, and we hope that this can help you navigate the current crisis situation. Of course, due to the crisis, many of us are working from home, so you may see some less than business backgrounds behind some of the speakers, and we hope you understand. The duration of this webinar is half an hour, and to avoid any static background noises, we've turned all the microphones off, but we do greatly appreciate your questions. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please just click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and you can submit your questions there. And then at the end of the webinar, if there's time, we'll be addressing some of those questions. As we wait for people to dial in, let me start off with just a few introductory slides on STORK, just to give those of you who don't know us a better idea of who we are and what we do. This will also help put into perspective the main presentation that will be given today. So STORK is a global provider of fully integrated O&M, turnarounds, modifications, and asset integrity solutions. So we're not an asset owner, but we do feel completely committed to keeping assets running at peak performance during all phases of that asset's life cycle. We are an international company. We operate in over 90 countries worldwide, and we often use this graphic to explain the buildup of our company. I know it looks like a lot, so I'm going to break it down into 3 sections for you. So most of STORK's people are here, working day and night at a client facility to keep it up and running, or performing turnarounds and trying to get the plant back up and running as fast as possible. But we also have our own brick and mortar facilities. They're often located in industrial dense zones around the world, and they support our local site team to do their work. So think of people like specialists and inspectors who support multiple clients, or planners who are planning turnarounds months in advance. This could also be our own workshop where we repair turbines, valves, pumps, and other equipment. Then we have our layer of global experts. These guys are available to support any project around the world. And it also refers to our online knowledge base, filled with innovations that can be accessed day and night from any place in the world. And many of our digital solutions like predictive maintenance, data analytics, and turnaround software are developed by this group. Of course, with every project that we encounter, we'll pull from all 3 layers of the company to get the job done. So without further ado, let me introduce the topic of today: managing the COVID-19 risk. Controlling your performance tomorrow is ensuring the understanding and management of the future risks. The importance of risk management in business cannot be understated. Effective risk management allows you to identify the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. By planning for unexpected events, you can be ready to respond if and when they arise. So here to share some insights with you, we have Dirk-Jan Vorn. Dirk-Jan is the Global Director of Corporate Risk Management for projects for STORK. And he is engaged in providing corporate risk management leadership by overseeing and expanding the implementation of structured risk management programs and promoting a company-wide culture of compliance and operational risk management. I wish you all an inspiring and educational half hour. Dirk-Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Savannah. Thank you, Savannah, and thank you all for joining this webinar. It's an interesting time, and risk management is on everybody's radar at this moment. So let me give you today some insights on what we've learned within STORK and what we're currently doing within STORK about risk management and dealing with the future risks. But let us get a moment to stand still at where we are within STORK and talk about the long history we have. Savannah talked a little bit about what STORK does and what we're currently providing, but remind us that STORK has over 150 years of innovation, delivering innovative solutions to you, our clients, and supporting our organizations and our communities. Innovation has been coupled with growth over time, and that's fantastic. Growth and innovation, making sure that we create profit and improve our organization is what we want. But protecting unwanted leakages is something which we'll talk about today. Managing those potential leakages due to the new reality we're living in within STORK and within our communities. Controlling our performance, controlling your performance, and managing that for tomorrow is understanding risk management. So how fast has our environment changed? This picture was taken only a few months ago. We were working as a team safely in close harmony, and I'm proud of what I see here. But let's face it, this is a picture which everybody will now say, ha, this is pre-COVID. The post-COVID area, which we're currently living in and going towards to, is changing and has changed our lives. It will change it for a long, long time afterwards. To have a society and an economic shaped in such a way that we can live with these new habits and these new regulations. It will change the way how we work with our colleagues, how we sit in the office, how we spend our times at home, and how we socialize with others. So let me give you a little bit of an outline of what I'd like to talk about today. The storyline for today is about, first of all, understanding where we are and seeing the perspective of COVID to what it does in our current environment. Further on, I'd like to emphasize a little bit on how risk management is dealt with within our organizations and within your organizations. As I stated, everybody is talking currently about risk management. We need to manage the risk of COVID. We need to manage the risks of all the activities which are going on to secure our future. Further on, I'll talk about how we'll deal with this risk management approach within STORK, the buildup of our risk management systems, and how it enables us to execute work safely and profitably to the compliance and the requirements of our clients. And lastly, I'll provide two separate topics. One, 7 items where I'll explain about what STORK has done in the past and what we're currently doing to manage the risk of COVID. And secondly, what my vision is and what we think as an organization, what the risks are towards our clients and what our clients could do to manage those risks. So this is the reality of today. These are the pictures taken over for the past few days and the past few weeks. We've been managing this risk. We've been managing a crisis. We've been trying to manage the well-being of our STORK heroes, our heroes at home, and their families. Our workers have been located at multiple sites across the world, far away from home, and without their and protecting the safety of our clients. Jim McQueenie, in his previous webcast, utilizing the secret weapon during COVID-19, explained a little bit about how we are doing this at STORK. But then going forward, he also addressed that the fact that this COVID situation is a risk which should have been on all the business risk assessments for each of the companies. It's a risk which has to be mitigated and should have been mitigated. Within STORK, we've had our crisis management emergency response processes all in place to manage those risks. And within days, we were able to execute work safely, managing a risk which we were prepared for, but the impact of that risk and the severity of the risk was unprecedented. And if you come then to the point of being an unprecedented risk, the first response has always been, okay, this is a black swan. It's an event which we couldn't have foreseen. It's an event which was never on our radar, and it couldn't have happened. For those who are not familiar with the terminology black swan, please revert back to Jim's presentation or look at the book written by Professor Taylor talking about the black swans. I'll give you a short summary. It wasn't a black swan. Pandemics and the way how we look at these risks has always been there. Pandemics are not rare. They are there in our history, and the likelihood is there even today. So how do we manage those new risks emerging from COVID going forward? By looking forward, it is first of all understanding where we are today. It's nicely depicted in this graph here. We've got our initial shock of the COVID situation. It started in China and everybody was relatively relaxed in What could happen? Did it really, will it really hit me? And will it go further? Then it hit the whole world and there was a main shock. Yes, we're currently in this situation and there's some relaxation going on. But like with earthquakes and any other natural event, there will be most likely some aftershocks. The severity, the impact, and the timing of those shocks is unknown. Currently, we feel ourselves quite safe in where we are. We think that we're safe, but until there is a vaccine and there is immunity for everybody, there will be this aftershock and it could hurt us. So what are the implications for our business today? It was quite an interesting part. So let me start with an example. As a result of this COVID crisis, many travel stopped. We can't go to the office, we can't meet with our colleagues, we can't work at site. So we travel less. Regional and intercontinental travels have been diminished. And travels with airplanes have even been reduced by 95%. As a result, which seems very logical, our fuel consumption has dropped. There's less use of oils and fossil fuels. That in its turn created another problem of lower revenues and lower oil consumption and oil productions for the upstream and downstream companies. But then there was an additional fact which we didn't account for, which is a simultaneous effect of lower oil prices. With that lower oil price and the COVID situation, we've got two balls which created a snowball. In essence, it's to me the perfect storm. We've got multiple risks with very high impact and a very unlikely scenario that it even could have happened. All in this combined does mean that in the going future, we will have to take into account that there will be reduced spendings for OPEX and for CAPEX, that our services will be lower, that there will be less of revenue to our organizations. We'll need to look at different ways how to survive and how to provide our clients with some improvements and to tailor their needs. As a knock-on effect, you'll probably also understand that labor suppliers are finding it difficult to find people to work over the regions, to have the right scaffolders in place, to ensure logistics. And that's what I will try to address during this topic. So by starting where we are, we didn't accept that both of the events could come together. So it's good to remind ourselves an Inuit proverb, which I've used often in the lectures I've provided within our organization. The bear that is in front of you and the bear that you can see in front of you is never the same bear which will kill your life, which will take your life away. What does that mean? It's not possible to see all the risks. The polar bear looks nice. It looks quite interesting, and we're well prepared of what we see. But before getting closer to this polar bear, we really need to make sure that we understand what's in our surroundings, how we deal with what's going on around us, and that we also anticipate the polar bear, which is not in this picture. So it's all about anticipating future events and looking in a crystal ball. Risk management is looking in this crystal ball and trying to put things on a register which may not all occur, but it's paramount that we put those items in there and understand them, that we manage them, and that we properly have mitigations in place to develop such a set of scenarios which will help us to deal with any unexpected events. In that way, we train ourselves and our organization to be resilient. And then when there is a surprise, an event which is unannounced and which was unforeseen, we are prepared to look at that future. So looking at the future is also about understanding what happens in the past, the knowledge we've gained in the past. But the knowledge we've gained in the past is not the answer for the future. It will give us some indications, it will give them some guidance, and it will tell us where we are and where we could be heading for. Accounting measures and KPIs which are in place could help us with that. But as a disclaimer, past results are not a guarantee for the future. It almost sounds like a financial disclaimer, but it really is. We can only learn from those past experiences. Much more important is to look forward in these scenarios, as I've addressed previously. To me, those are the key risk indicators, which give us a potential heading for the future. For those, we'll use internal processes, use external economic factors, external social factors, and also look at the broader geopolitical trends. So on that part, looking at a leading indicator on the COVID situation, where we currently are and how we can deal with those, what could be quite interesting is talk about the items on this slide. So let's start here, very far away, the impacts of the geopoliticals. What could happen for regions, political instability, protectionism, the ability for people to reduce or for governments to implement where we work, how we do business, taxations which will change. But that will also have an effect on human behavior. The human behavior will then also change. How will we work? Will we be likely to travel to other locations? Will we look at other parts of our social life which can influence going forwards? There's a short-term and a long-term effect in this one. Getting closer to our business, it's about the industry dynamics, our supply chain. Where do I get our materials? We can create a lot of items, we can create a lot of things, but we're only as strong as the weakest link. So having that full dynamic in place, providing the labor, providing our resources, providing materials, and delivering the services can only be delivered if we have everything in place and properly managed. Those industry dynamics will change. So being prepared about the changes and securing those dynamics is crucial going forwards. What could help us in these situations is technology. But how will technology evolve? It's a complete unknown, but technology will come. We're living in a digital and a digitization world. And the changes in digital and the way how we operate our works will be improving. So going forward, it's all about the next step on regulations, new policies, which are often implemented quite quickly, especially in a crisis situation. The crisis situation will very quickly have governments implement rules and regulations. As organizations, we have to act upon them very, very quickly and resolve those requirements in a very short notice. All in all, and before we close this circle, it's also about the macroeconomics effect. Yes, we're living in a world where there is some uncertainty, but the uncertainty is even more severe in the financial markets. How will financial institutions and the capital markets support us as an organization going forward? There might be limited access to capital going forward. Governments have insured certain items which we could use, but are they still there for the future? That's all about scenario building and understanding the risks going forwards. So within STORK, we've looked at this from another perspective. We first of all looked at the external factors, looking far away, geopolitical, external, and social. But this slide tells you about the internal processes we've got in place. I use the acronym FORMALS to tackle those potential risks. I finished with my financials, the effect we have on a global situation, on exchange rates, the pricing of materials, the impact of financial institutions. Following that, we've got our operational issues. How do we execute our works? What are the risks related to the operations we're executing? Can we do it safely? Have our crisis measurements been implemented properly? Then we've got our regulations. Further on, I'll talk also about the regulatory implications. We've got some managerial issues, managing the suppliers, managing potential partners, the risk of third parties and subcontractors. Don't forget the impact on our environmental situations, because due to the current crisis, we've changed the habits, we've changed the ways of working. There might be a potential risk that those could incur for a longer future. Then legal issues, which is always a concern. Do the risks align with the requirements and the terms and conditions under which we deliver our services and how we provide our quality to our clients. And lastly, our strategical issue, something which we can do and things we cannot do. Build on the experiences that I explained before and using that as an advantage to grow our knowledge and to grow the capabilities going forwards. So briefly, how does that line up? We've got strategic risk management, looking at the larger effects, implementing those properly downwards within tactical and executable items, and aligning those with the operational risk assessments we've got on our projects and we've got on our businesses. Making sure that each of these layers are properly interacted is crucial to making sure that we provide a proper risk management structure and a risk management culture. But that's a key issue here on the cultural side. Making sure that from a cultural side, people adhere to the internal practices and procedures, that we've got a lean operating principle which fulfills the needs and the requirements of modern day business, and that we rely on outsourcing, subcontracting, and working with our partners who have the same culture and the same mentality as we do. To ensure this going forwards, it's very important to have a risk organization in place which understands the risks versus the rewards, what we're doing. Making sure that there is a risk-aware culture and that it's not about hope, which is, to me, a delayed disappointment, but making sure that we deliver this promise on a proper way and managing the opportunities going forwards. In other words, say what we're doing and doing what we're saying. This brings me to the second session of the topic. I've addressed the item about risk management and that it all comes from understanding where we are and understanding the risks. Without properly understanding where we are, we cannot know what we're going and where we're heading. So identification of the risks incurring is crucial going forwards. But it's not always possible to avoid any of the risks. Avoiding the risk is one of the mitigations which can be placed. But most commonly, what the options are is reducing and managing those risks, potentially transferring them, but all in all, ensuring that we have the proper mitigations in place. So going forward, I'll go to 7 topics, which will align with our items, knowledge we've gained within our global experts, the way how we do business, and going forward as in the STORK organization. These 7 topics I'll address. We'll talk about practical issues such as confined spaces, it's about suppliers, contractual items, workforce related items, learnings, working closely, and also reducing staff and working with less people on site to avoid any of the implications related to the COVID risks going forward. So let's start with this first practical topic. Working in a confined space. Working in a confined space always requires a multitude of persons working together and in close harmony. But working in this confined space also means that people need to be in close connection and working together. Avoiding a risk and reducing the risk of people working inside a confined space can be very easily mitigated and reduced by using drones. The application of these robotic solutions, like the ball drone I've depicted here, will help me to reduce the risk of any potential fatality inside any of the confined spaces. But also it will deliver quite interesting amount of data, which will be captured and can be analyzed going forwards. So using that digitization to move towards a better solution going forwards. Another item which has been often addressed in the COVID situation as a risk mitigation strategy, the force majeure clause. For those familiar with contracts and working with the contracts we're dealing, the force majeure clause is a walk away clause. But walking away in a crisis is not always a good situation. Making sure that we have a proper mindset, how do we manage it? Because we're often in here as a partnership, trying to provide the security of the assets, trying to provide the security of our employees. By including the appropriate terms in our contracts, Having a proper discussion about what we require from both sides of the terms and conditions will help to set the right culture and create the right mindset. Because the mindset, to me, it's about managing contractual situations in a partnership, communicating and notification to each other, making sure that we have the proper situations in place. But also there could be situations like change in law clauses. Governments, as I addressed previously, may be able to change law very, very quickly. But going forwards in these law changes, having the appropriate contractual clauses in there will help us to go forwards and work together as a partnership. A third item to be addressed is working at heights. Sounds all familiar. Your assets and the way how we work often require a lot of scaffolding. But scaffolding is not the only solution to work at heights. Look at the other option, because scaffolding does require quite an amount of people. It takes some time to build the scaffold, and it's also susceptible to potential drop of objects. If you would apply some rope access, there is much more flexibility, less people involved, and you can be more agile to provide the right person at the right location executing the works there, which will reduce your risk, and it can also help us to accelerate the works going forward. A third item, as addressed, is about the criticality of our supply chain. Do we have the right resources? Do we have the right materials? Do we have the right consumables available to do the works which we need to execute? Having that supply chain properly in place is very, very important. And making sure that we analyze that upfront will help us also to reduce any potential reductions in availability, downtime to the assets, and continuation of the works. Making sure that we have some continuity in the suppliers, doing supplier analysis, criticality analysis, having backups in place is one of the main risk mitigation strategies to be implemented in our works. Making also sure that we have potential channel changes of suppliers and resources. But foremost, and the important mitigation strategy is have an open communication with client requirements and supplier availabilities and communicating them properly to each other. A fifth item is the flexibility of workforce. As you've also incurred, we're all working in different locations. Having the right people at the right time available is what it's all about. But how do we do that if we can't go to the same location? If we can't be available with large crews and vans, providing them at the right locations? So having some proper implementations here and having those available can help us to improve the way how we work. One of the easier mitigations we set in place was doing some remote medical support, having our employees call a mobile doctor. Instead of going to the office or going to the location and visit the doctor, it is on a mobile device, easy to assess the situations, and we can properly address and anticipate what goes on. Implementing also remote surveillance, remote monitoring, that it doesn't require the all amount of people at the locations. Reducing the amount of workforce available is reducing the risk of contaminations going forwards, but also ensuring flexibility and continuation. A second to last option is working remotely. We've talked about on work sites and at locations, but we also have a lot of the workshops into our organization. And in each of those workshops, we have specialists. How do we connect those specialists instead of sending them over and reducing the amount of travel time? The COVID situation also created a very interesting opportunity by working very closely together using remote access, video cameras, video conferencing. And these are the examples where our employees in multiple locations were able to share their knowledges and experiences. A final mitigation strategy we've put in place, which I think is a very interesting one, is before a turnaround, we've been requested by a client to execute a turnaround. With the COVID situation, this offshore turnaround was scheduled and had to be executed because it was paramount to their operations. What we did is working with our client to create a new way of inductions and trainings. We've created to bring the village, which we call to bring our employees and train them, not in a physical way, but more digital. Be able to train on a device and have that training delivered to you very, very shortly at the time and the notice you had there. Second of all, it also reduces the risk of people contamination each other, but it also ensures that we have security about the right qualifications and the right certifications of our staff. All in all, this helped us to be more efficient, be prepared for the situations going forwards. So I've now talked about what STORK has been doing about risk management and what we do as mitigation strategies. But I'd also like to address some of the items which might be interesting for you. What has changed your world and what could impact your world in the near future? And I've listed 5 items. So the one thing which you might be prepared for is the bankruptcy of your suppliers. Although they have been suppliers for a long time, current situations may change very quickly. Capital might not be available, and that might very quickly result in the bankruptcy of your suppliers, which will result in also not executing the work which is needed. Having some exchange rates. We're working in international businesses. Having the right exchange rates and understanding those exchange risks can be quite a significant challenge. Another part which has been receiving a lot of debate recently is the insurability. By enforcing everybody to execute their work, are we still insured? Are we not exposing our employees to an environment which could make us liable for the future operations? So take that into mind and be very cautious about the liability and the insurability of the operations you're executing. As an owner and as a client, ensuring that you'll provide the right operational procedures in place to execute those works. And lastly, an interesting one, which might pop up very quickly, is potential human interests and labor unrests. Labor unions, people trying to, strikes which will happen. So be prepared and try to avoid those risks by having a proper communication with the labor unions and the labor forces you're using. So all in all, let's start by ending up what I've discussed. Some people perceive risk management as a big red flag. We're there to stop. No, that's not the way. It's not a barrier, it's an enabler going forwards. So from that point on, making sure that we have a structured approach, a structured governance in place going forwards, but also have a compliance and having sure that we have the right innovations in place. So all in all, by having risk management in place, it's not about this red flag, but it's more as a red cross. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about. Thank you for listening at this stage, and I'm happy to transfer it to you, Savannah.
All right, thank you so much, Dirk-Jan, for this presentation about managing our risk during this COVID-19 time. We are a little bit short on time, but I would like to just ask one question that came in. We've had several of them. Please remember that if I don't ask your question right now, we will be sending out the answers to all the questions in the follow-up material. So just one quick question for you, Dirk-Jan. What are the scenarios that you are dealing with when tackling the COVID risk to support larger turnarounds?
So larger turnarounds currently require a lot of people. So making sure that we are part of the preparations and helping in the planning situations is a crucial scenario which needs to be implemented. Having an open communication with our clients and dealing with the challenges upfront and way before we execute the turnarounds is crucial. So making sure that we're dealing it together, communicating it, and working it as a partnership. That's the scenario I've been using and I'm anticipating very, very quickly.
All right, thank you so much. I'd like to now conclude this webinar. I want to thank you all for joining us. Of course, it goes without saying we'd be happy to discuss this with you further directly. So we're going to leave the presentation open for just a few more minutes. If you'd like to just click on that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, you can leave a question for Dirk-Jan there, or leave your contact information, or a request for more information. Anything you'd like, we'll give you some time to do that. I'd like to say now that STORK will be proceeding with knowledge-based webinars again in September. So please keep an eye out on the stork.com website, where we'll be announcing the upcoming webinars. And if you're interested in a specific topic, please let us know. You can leave a message there at Q&A. You can email us at the email address on the next slide, but just let us know and we can add that into our webinar agenda. If you wish, you can also leave us your email address and ask to be notified. We can put you on the invite for all of our future webinars. This presentation and the recorded webinar will be available on the stork.com website, and all registered attendees will be receiving an email with the link to that in the coming days. I want to thank you again for your participation, and I hope to see you again in a few months. So please stay safe and healthy until we meet again.